You are listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. Sustainable World Radio brings you in-depth interviews, news, and commentary about positive solutions to environmental challenges. Solutions that adhere to the permaculture ethics of earth care, people care, fair share. Are you interested in learning more about permaculture projects around the globe? How to plant a food forest? Restorative design or ethnobotany? Then stay tuned for Sustainable World Radio. I'm your host and producer, Jill Cloutier. My guest today is John Steele. John has been on the program before, and welcome back, John. It's great to have you here.
Wonderful.
For those who didn't listen to our first interview, I wanted to tell you a bit about John Steele's background. John is an aromatic consultant, archaeologist, author, and teacher. John has been called a free-range aromatic explorer, and he's the owner of Lifetree Aromatix, a line of botanical essential oils from around the world. John teaches workshops on aromatherapy, aromatic blending, and the sacred use of fragrance in contemporary and ancient cultures. For those who did not hear the first interview that we did, could you share a bit about how you first started getting involved in the world of essential oils and aromatics?
Yes, it would be a pleasure. I was actually living in England at the time, working as an archaeologist. Stone circles, things like Stonehenge, of which there are 900 stone circles, for example, in the British Isle, and that's just the stone circles. I was fascinated by this, what some people refer to it as terrestrial acupuncture, and that is influencing the energy meridians of the earth. And I was one of the coordinators of a project, a 10-year project called the Dragon Project. And the dragon was always symbolic of telluric, that's earth energies in ancient China. And one day, a person who does shiatsu on me came over and did a really good shiatsu on me, and I said I was having difficulty sleeping, and she took out, I'll remember it very crystal, and she took out this bottle of essential oil. It was a lavender. She said, put some of this in your bath, put 8 to 10 drops, and put some on your pillow. And I did, and I had this revelation that it was like medicine that smells good. My father was an ear, nose, and throat doctor, so I was around hospitals which did not smell good. In fact, they smelled really difficult to be in. And so this was like, it was just like a satori, like an epiphany, like a eureka moment. And that's, from that moment on, it just flipped a gene switch of like DNA memory. And I began reading and studying about aromatherapy on my own. There was only one book on this subject. That was Robert Tisserand's The Art of Aromatherapy. And I reread it 4 or 5 times, just in a row. I just read it over and over and over, so it would really saturate. What began to happen is that I was fascinated with the idea of integrating, because that's my overall approach, is the transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach. So the aromatics, and then wisdom teachings of archaeology and anthropology, and at the same time I was actually working on a doctoral thesis on memory from a transdisciplinary point of view. So that's how it all began to coalesce. And I was teaching. I had the opportunity to teach all of these subjects at University College London. I was just given free rein to play with these concepts, and that's exactly what I did. And I taught them all in my classes. I taught aromatic oils. I taught archaeology of stone circles. I taught things about anthropological use of fragrance. So, the students loved it. They just loved that, these modules of 20 minutes of this, 20 minutes of that. And before we go on, I will just say that my approach to whole free-range subject, as you put it, is one that is premised on the idea that my passion is definitely the aromatic domain and all that it entails, from the physical to the metaphysical. The idea of fundamentally of waking up, of awareness, is even more primordial, more fundamental. So, because I believe that you can wake up in any one of the sensorial domains. You can be a master musician, a master artist, a master cook, a master shiatsu, but there's mastery in all domains. And so I just wanted to have this level of awareness, this level of, if you will, what is called dharma, of the idea of are you awake or are you asleep, and then build the aromatics on top of that and see the relationship. But I just want to say I feel that aromatics is not the only way. It is a beautiful way, but I realize that the most important thing is this idea of using this to wake up. And to wake up means to be a more holistic person, to be a more responsible person, to be more in tune with the environment and the people around you, to have a kind of a symbiotic, intelligent, aware relationship.
And so really bringing those two together, the aromatics and the awareness. And in a workshop I took with you, you were telling us to think outside the perfume bottle.
Yeah, which means, in a sense, to me, what that means is, like, I studied aromatherapy on the medical side with French doctors, Dr. Daniel Penauel, for example, and Pierre Francombe, who helped to start the Origins line. And I've also studied with my Russian mentor, Galina Listen, who is a Russian MD, all advanced medical stuff. And I love that because my dad was a doctor, but my interest is very much also bridges into this realm of archetypes and ideas and shamanism and waking up, like really moving. So that's what I mean by not just being, just keeping it to, do we use lavender for headaches? You've got to know that, but I'm interested in the more, if you will, esoteric and dharma levels as well. So I'm interested in all of it. I think it's an amazing paradigm, the world of fragrance. So let's think outside the perfume bottle.
And so, John, there's so much to cover today. Where would you like to start?
I think we'll start with this idea of looking at these two cultures, the sacred use of fragrance in ancient Egypt and the sacred use of fragrance in Amazonian shamanism, just to show that you have a desert culture and then you have a rainforest culture. And just looking at some of the parallels for example, we'll just segue into this idea of shamanism. I know that we were going to touch on it, so we might as well go for it now. And shamanism is really what you might call a worldwide Paleolithic technology, so to speak. It's a mind technology that there is the ability, and it's not only the ability. The shamans are people usually at the edge of society. They're the medicine doctors, the witch doctors, the healers. They have a foot in the spirit world and they have a foot in the physical world. And it's that translation between the domains that way that is fascinating, because they help to find game. For example, in jungle cultures. Where are the monkeys? Where are these certain birds that the tribe needs to live on? So they find game. They also have some aspect of weather control, like the rainmakers, the ability to bring rain. They also are healers physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. They're really, in a sense, they're the antennae of the tribe, of the culture. They're for keeping it healthy. They have a certain kind of equanimity about them of how do you keep a tribe intact or a people intact and healthy from the physical to the metaphysical. So they contact the spirit world. And there are said in many types of shamanism to be three worlds: the underworld, the human world, and the spirit world. And this is seen like in many, many different cultures, like worldwide we see these things. And they use plant medicines, they use drumming, they use fasting, they use many types of initiatory processes for both themselves and their patients to contact the spirit world. They're looking to interact with helping spirits, animal spirits, plant spirits, gods, goddesses, any spirit domain that can make an influx through the conduit of the shaman and be of assistance in healing. And there's another, it just occurred to me while I'm talking. In Africa, there's a very interesting use of smell, and the shamans, or the witch doctors, as they're called in, say, South Africa, are called sangomas, and they have the ability to smell a thief or to smell a liar. Now, what does that say? It's so interesting. It says that every emotional state has a correlate to it that actually gives off a subtle smell. And this is, and then if we look at ancient China for a moment, all the Chinese wizards of Taoist healing and acupuncture and Chinese herbalism, TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, they all knew that each disease had a specific odor correlate. And they could smell that. And today, even in acupuncture today, it is kind of atrophied, but some people are aware of it, that they can detect by smell. It's like even right now, dogs, as you probably know, are used to find cancer in people. I mean, to me, and that's by smell.
Because they have so many more receptors, right? Or
They
smell.
do. That's exactly it. But getting back to the smell a thief or smell a liar, I mean, it's like, there's the work of Candace Pert. She was this amazing researcher at the National Institute of Health. She's the one who found the opiate receptors in the human brain. She determined that there is a neuropeptides. These are small chemicals, which she calls the molecules of emotion. And these are, there's a molecular correlate, a cascade comes out of our endocrine system for every emotional state we have. So the same thing for a liar and a thief. There are people who think that they can, accurately disguise their true intention or their true being. But the witch doctor, just like has this capacity, the shaman, to smell what is, as it were, behind the mask, behind the appearance. This is what smell does in cultures. It shows you what the deepest level of intentionality and being is. Behind whatever glamour you might cast over it to look beautiful, to look pretty, to look innocent. There's always, and that's this capacity to use smell, and this is the key, as direct intuition. That the deepest level of smell is really deep, intuitive, direct knowing. And it's so interesting, too. I'm just segueing all over the place. Even in the Bible, you find the prophet Isaiah. He talks about when the Messiah comes. He says, he shall know the truth by smell. And what that means is there's There is the capacity to know something directly, no matter what the external appearance is. You can read the depths of something, and this translates into this idea. I touched on it in the first talk that I did with you. This, and I'll mention it again because it's so interesting. In French, the verb sentir, sentir, in French it means to smell, and the identical verb, with no accent changes whatsoever, means to feel. I mean, it's unbelievable. It means that I've always read it as there is this smell-feel kind of continuum that is what this sense is about, that it's like vibratory feeling and segueing into physical smelling, that there's a continuum. And that's what shamans have, that's what great religious people have, great teachers have, is this intuitive capacity hooked up with this kind of smell feel. So the idea that the shaman can smell a thief or smell a liar, they all have nuances that are very, very, very subtle, and that can be detected by these beings, these teachers, these shamans, that have a foot in the spirit world and in the others.
It's been proven that nonverbal communication is really greater than verbal communication and how we feel around someone. I wonder how much of that could be smell.
A lot of it is smell, but it's smell, but it's smell feel. It's that continuum again. And that touches on that part of the capacity, the deep sense of smell is actually what we might call clairsentience. That means clear feeling. And clear feeling is an extension of clear smelling, or of clear smelling and clear feeling, like clairvoyance. You know, it's that extra, it's that capacity to sense the extra octaves that were of perception. Huxley talked about the doors of perception. And so but you're right, it is all of those nonverbal, it's this clear feeling, this realm of the hunch, this realm of, I was thinking about it the other day, when I say to you, he had an inkling that XYZ, what does the word inkling mean to you?
Intuitive.
Yeah.
Clue?
Yeah, exactly. But an inkling means it's a very small twitch of something's not right here. There's more than meets the eye. But you're right. And so if we go back to Egypt, there is this recent work. It's about the wisdom, the shamanic wisdom of the pyramid texts. The pyramid texts were these ancient texts that were chiseled in stones on some of the oldest pyramids in Egypt, the Pyramid of Unas, for example. They're about, 2800 BC, something like that, 27 or so, and they're all chiseled. And it really shows on the walls the shamanic journey of, because the pharaoh in ancient Egypt, in earliest ancient Egypt, was really a shamanic person as well as a temporal ruler. He interfaced with the gods, or what they call the netters, which means these archetypal principles. And he would literally, to condense it down, he would take these out-of-body journeys, and they were usually induced by the sacred flower of ancient Egypt, which was the blue water lily. The botanical term for that is Nymphaea cerulea. It's not a lotus, it's like a cousin to the lotus. And this is the most beautiful plant. It symbolizes immortality, rejuvenation, and perfect beauty, because the plant was beautiful. But it was also a psychotropic plant. And it can induce at a shamanic level, it can induce out-of-body or heightened awareness or connection to, like I said, the shamans relate to the helping spirits, whether it's helping gods or it's helping animal spirits, human spirits. There is this idea of going out of the body using, and this blue water lily is an intensely aromatic plant. That's the key. It's a very, very aromatic plant, and it's a very beautiful plant. It has these long, tapering, blue-purple petals, and this golden center. And he would go out and interface with the different netters, or gods and goddesses, if you will, for the well-being of the governance of the country. And it's interesting that during the journey of this pyramid text, it says, and I'm paraphrasing now, but I will go on a stairway to heaven to meet with the gods and goddesses. And that, incidentally, is really, in a sense, the origin of that Zeppelin song. You know, that's where it comes from, that stairway to heaven. And that's what, in a sense, there's a confluence also between some, and I underline it, some aromatic plants are visionary plants. There's a confluence. Not all of them are, but some of them are consciousness expanding plants, like, for example, cannabis. Cannabis is a very aromatic plant, but it's also a conscious expanding plant. And it's not always like that, but you will, even in just plain aromatherapy, where you get beautiful smell, you will get the induction of expanded mind, of calm mind, of more perceptive mind, of more integrative mind, that capacity to connect the dots. So you have, in Egypt, you have this paradigm of this kind of shamanic activity, using the plant to govern the country. And then if you segue to Amazonian shamanism, you get into this domain of, for example, the visionary plants of the rainforest, for example, the ayahuasca, which is a blend of two particular plants. The whole concept there is the shaman uses visionary plants which actually disclose the condition of the human aura on a patient. And they can see the human aura around the patient, and they see two aspects of it that are significant. One is, number one, where are the breaks in the auric field? And because they believe that illness transduces down from the subtle level to the physical. And so if it's in the subtle energetic field, it will transduce down into the physical field. And I think that's where we are today in our mind-body stuff of alternative medicine, in a certain sense. And the other thing is, they smell the auric field. And they can smell that where the breaks are, there are smells of rotting organic material. That's what it smells like. It smells rotten. And they have a very interesting hierarchy of classifications of different smells that talk about the smells of the auric fields. The interesting thing, and I know we were going to touch on this later, but here it is that they then use many of the shamans of the Amazon, particularly of Brazil and Peru, are what is called in Spanish perfumeros. And they actually use fragrance to heal the broken, rotten-smelling aspects of the defiled, degraded auric field of the patient. And they do that in several ways. Number one, they prescribe aromatic baths for the patient to bathe in on a daily basis, depending on what they see, specifically plants will come to them. So they have the aromatic bath. And then the other thing that they do is something called spit blowing, where they take, like, for example, orange flower water or rose water in the mouth of the shaman, and they kind of go like that. They spit blow it over the patient's head who's there for healing. And it opens up the patient's visionary field so that they can begin to see something. It's not just the shaman that they can perceive in that particular domain. What they're trying to do in Brazil, they say that what they want to induce in the patient is this word that they use called florescer. And florescer means that they want the patient to blossom, to flourish, to do well, to flower. They want the patient to go from state A of one of illness to wellness. That's the florescer path. But they use the image of botanical blossoming. So this idea of florescer is really, it's a very beautiful one, because you're trying to, in a sense, get humans to act like a botanical growth pattern of evolution. And they want the patient to evolve. They want the patient to do well. I once had the opportunity with this wonderful shaman, Pablo Amarengo. He and Eduardo Luna. He's a Colombian anthropologist that I've met, and he brought Pablo to dinner. This was in Los Angeles, and I had the opportunity to talk to him. And he took one of his ayahuasca paintings. He had the capacity to remember, because ayahuasca is probably, it contains dimethyltryptamine, otherwise known as DMT, and it's one of the most intense visionary molecules there are, because it opens up, just like the blue water lily opens up to the realm of the netters and the realm of the gods and goddesses. This dimethyltryptamine also opens up to the realms of helping spirits or gods and goddesses and subtle forces and plant energies, the whole subtle field of reality. It was called Sublime Fairies, who have as their food the scent of flowers.
I love that.
And it was beautiful, and it was it looked like an Indian. It looked like a Tibetan tonka or an Indian tonka from India, that where each element in there is very symbolic. And so there are animals, there's models of the symbolic representations of chlorophyll, of relations between humans, and this realm of fragrance in Amazonian shamanism is considered to be indispensable for healing. Just indispensable. But what I wanted to go on to say, fragrance is so valuable for repair of the aura, is what happens sometimes. Not only this is an ayahuasca story, but it often happens. It can happen with any other altered state situation or mental exploration situation. And that is, there's a certain point, and it happens this was ayahuasca, where people taking this brew, it's called a tea, when you take it, that you can get caught in a kind of rotational vortex that you can't escape from in terms of your mental process. And this is what we might call in psychological terms a repetition compulsion syndrome. Like, why am I a victim? Why am I a victim? Why does the world not give me this? Why am I suffering? Why am I, that rotational thought.
A loop, kind of when you're stuck in a loop.
It's exactly that. It's exactly that. It is a stuck loop, a repetition compulsion loop from which there is apparently in that situation no exit. So it's exactly the same thing where you get into this locked loop. Now, why am I going over this? I'm going over this because what the shamans tend to do is to bring in, I'll quote before some of the sessions. This is from Peru. The shaman, for 20 minutes, the men chant or gaze towards the distant blank silhouette of the forest, lighting small pipes of Peruvian tobacco, and picking a few stalks of an odorous plant whose smell will protect them from bad visions. Now, that to me, that just lit me up. Whose smell will protect them from bad visions. Bad visions meaning this repetition compulsion process. And then it says the shamans guide the young men, teasing them into chanting, blowing on their faces, stroking their foreheads as they appear too deep in a frightening trance, and holding the sweet-smelling plant under their noses to bring them out. So I wanted to track down what this sweet-smelling plant was. And it turns out to be, the botanical name is Oxymum mercanthum, and the popular name of it is Amazonian basil.
Oh, that's, wow.
So isn't that something? So the basil is a plant that we find in that, for example, Robert Tisserand, who is a good friend of mine, and he wrote the book, The Art of Aromatherapy, really talks about basil. Okay, he's talking about an oil, but he says that what basil has the capacity to do is to deal with mental fatigue and to deal with a situation in which it's just this, where there is a mental lock. And it has a capacity to restore flow of the mind. And this essential oil that I've been studying in aromatherapy is the direct analog of the Amazonian basil that the shamans were using. So it's really quite extraordinary that we can find this aromatherapy analog, and that there is a parallel in the Amazon. He says oil of basil is an excellent, and this is Tisserand, oil of basil is an excellent, indeed perhaps the best aromatic nerve tonic. It clears the head, relieves intellectual fatigue, and gives the mind strength and clarity. It is of great strength, a great value in states of nervousness, anxiety, and depression. It is uplifting.
While you were speaking about the basil, I kept thinking about people with depression, that are stuck in these mental loops that don't serve us. So this could be a very useful
Absolutely.
plant in therapy, I would think.
Absolutely. But you need the type of therapist who is familiar with subtle energy or open to it to act as a guide with this. Yes, I truly believe that. In fact, I've got not with basil, but I've had a psychiatrist who has been using aromatic waters and their spray in his sessions to get people to be able to talk freely about their issues. So given that, I mean, there's all types of different analogs to this, but what I want to bring out is that here you have, when the mind becomes what we might call hypnotically fixated on a frightening image, and to use your word again, in a closed loop of anxiety, it goes unconscious. The mind goes unconscious. Now, there are several levels of unconscious. Carl Jung talked about that what he called the transcendent function is where your conscious mind is linked to your unconscious, that there's a conduit between these worlds. So you can have a conscious-unconscious link, but when you get in these closed loops, it's unconscious-unconscious. It's not conscious-unconscious. And when you have unconscious-unconscious or real unconsciousness, that means that you have no will. You have no intentionality. You are seen as the recipient of external forces, and you have suspended your capacity to reprogram yourself. And it's like a broken record, where you just go
over and over and over.
Yeah. So what the fragrance does of Basil here, it synesthetically, and I'm going to go into that word in a moment, shifts the weight given to visual imagery as it unlocks the anxiety loop by restoring the natural fluidity of mind in a completely different sensorial language of smell. That's the key, that it has the capacity by a cross-sensorial break in the language that the mind is using to visualize anxiety. It's only visual, but you're using fragrance to break the visual lock. And it works.
Okay, so if you're not in the Amazon and you're somewhere around the world and you're not with a shaman and you're not taking these mind-expanding botanical medicines, can you still use fragrance to stop loops and grow?
Absolutely. This is just a really heightened model. But yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what, and I hope that's what there is going on right now in people exploring the subtle use of aromatics in mind, spirit, healing, and relationship to disconnect from body. And yes, I'm hoping that this is opening up. This is coming back to a shamanic use of fragrance to break the locks of a different sensorial modality. And the word, let me just say a word about the word synesthesia. Syn means together and thesia means to sense. It means to sense together, and synesthesia is all about cross-sensorial perception or cross-sensorial influence. And what do I mean by cross-sensorial? It means like the capacity to hear a color, and just as the shamans refer to in the visionary state, they talk about fragrant songs. You see, you go from one domain is fragrance, the other is audio. Normally, we compartmentalize each sensorial activity, and it's like nice little corral, and that's where it stays. In synesthesia, this capacity to cross these barriers that are normally, I saw this, I smelled this, I tasted this, all differently. We know that originally that in medical history of synesthesia, it was originally thought to be a pathology in modern-day psychotherapy. It's like, hey, you've got your wires crossed. This is where people were brought in, and remedies were seen as radical as electroshock to the cranium. That's what they were using to break the stuck loop. Can you imagine? Electors, it's like being hit by a lightning bolt. I'd rather go with the Basil myself. And so, but here's the thing: is that throughout culture, worldwide cultures, it's always the shamans, the poets, the artists, the sensitive, feeling people. All of those people have synesthetic experiences. They have the ability to translate from one domain to another. You know, they describe a taste of a beautiful meal in color terms, or in fragrant terms, or not just taste terms. So this idea of synesthesia is really key. The wise, the wisdom use of synesthesia, coupled with aromatics, is in alternative healing or subtle energy healing or Reiki or whatever you want to do in that domain. If you have a good facilitator who can stand on, who can straddle the border between ordinary and non-ordinary reality, that's where the shaman lives, in that boundary. That he can translate from one domain to the other. He's like as it were, that capacity to go back and forth. It's kind of shuttle diplomacy on the etheric level. And so another note about this stuck sense that we were talking about, this repetition compulsion thing, because a lot of people get anxiety, they get depression, they feel helpless, they feel hopeless, and they just feel stuck or locked. It's like evolutionary gridlock in your own mind. And so the analogy that I always bring to this, which is if people can remember being by a creek or a small stream, and you sit by the edges of it and you observe the water and the flow and the forest or the jungle, whatever, you notice, and I've done this a lot, you notice that at the sides of the creek or the stream, that if there's a leaf in the stream, it will get caught on the side of the stream in an eddy.
Mm-hmm.
And what is an eddy?
It's a little loop. It's a little circle moving around.
That's right. And it's an eddy. So the leaf just goes around and around and around. And I've watched that so many times, and that's what I use as the image here. That this eddy traps thoughts, and it makes them go in this locked feedback kind of loop. And then this segues into the Sanskrit word in Dharma teachings, which we've all come across, called samsara. Samsara is literally, it's the illusionary display of suffering cycles in life. And it's very illustrative that in the Tibetan translation of samsara, I asked one of my Tibetan Buddhist teacher, Sagyal Rinpoche. He wrote the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And I was in his first group of students when he came to the West in London. And I asked him about samsara. He said it's very interesting. It comes from the Tibetan word korwa, Khorwa. And what he told me what it meant, it blew my mind. He said the image of korwa is a dog chasing its tail.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's seen that.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go.
No, I was just thinking the eddy is that's the eddy that you're stuck in.
That's the eddy. That is the eddy. And you know that a dog chasing its tail is got this dilemma, because the faster it goes, the faster its tail moves. And so what an eddy is what samsara really is that it's a lot of movement, but no resolution.
Which really is a lot of us are experiencing
Of course.
at this current time. I read a quote once, and I may have said this in the last interview, but I read a quote by a Buddhist teacher, and he said that we are lazy. We're lazy in our distractedness.
It's true. It's true, and we're lazy, but we have a loss of will and a loss of intentionality, and that's based on a loss of mindfulness. But this thing that goes around and around, and because of our laziness or our fearfulness, so
Or
many
helplessness,
or
feeling you can't
helplessness.
change. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. There's a hopeless movement going on here, and it's so interesting to talk about fragrance. I believe it was the fragrance house of Guerlain, French house, that brought out a perfume called Samsara. And for the life of me, I've never talked to them, but I could never figure out, even as a joke, who would want to name that you're going to cover yourself up with samsara. There's enough of it in the world already. You know what I mean?
A little more suffering for me, please. I'll spray it on
Yeah,
me.
yeah, some fragrant suffering for me. I mean, to me, it just shows a certain disconnect in that whole design PR qualities. I think they just wanted to take something exotic. I've never heard the full story. I would like to, but just from my external view, I'm wondering about it. But anyhow, what this all is about, the eddy and the dog chasing its tail, this is rotational energy loop that appears to be inescapable. And so this is it's a spin cycle. It's a spin cycle, and the thing about the spin cycle is that it creates a screen for the mind's fears and helplessness to be projected upon. The faster something spins, it creates a dramatic screen level of taking the rotational energy and putting it into a visual and a feeling form. And this rotational energy, we get a deeper insight into it if we look at the Sanskrit word for thoughts, and thought. The word in Sanskrit is called vritti, V-R-I-T-T-I, and that means that's your thought pattern. And do you know what the image of vritti is?
Mm-mm.
It's a little whirlwind. And there it is. It's that rotational energy again.
And it takes so much energy you're expending energy it's exhausting.
It is exactly that. So why I'm spending so much time on all this is that it's all about using fragrance to restore flow. And one last element of this what it means is that every thought pattern that you have, if it's not aware, it sends up this whole current of little vrittis, that these little whirlwinds, kind of these little epicenters of rotational energy in the mind. And so I'm just saying that the subtle dynamics of thought, and if we use fragrance consciously as aromatic tools for conscious transformation.
To use fragrance consciously, what is an example of that?
It's interesting, for example, let's just go back to this stuck memory place. I mean, this stuck rotational energy. Mm-hmm. To use fragrance to unlock stuck, to restore flow to a stuck mind. So it has psychotherapeutic effects. It can have creative effects. It can liberate creativity, not just mental health, but actual creativity. And the idea to think, again, outside the perfume bottle. It can be used, here's what fragrance can be used for. I'll put it in Jungian terms. Fragrance can be used along with the attitude of wanting to transform. This goes along with the flora sera thing, is one of the things that we want to do, and Jung talks about it, it fascinated me when he used this term, is he said to make change, you have to be able to reconstellate the psyche. And then reconstellate the psyche, I talk about it in all my workshops a little bit. It just means the capacity to take all your fixed attitudes and your fixed ways of seeing, your tape loops, and reshuffle the deck of your fixed attitudes and begin to look at them, free them up from their past stuck memory associations and look at them freshly. That's what fragrance can do. And so that's where you go from laziness, which that was absolutely right what you said. You go from laziness to gaining some will, gaining some intentionality, and you can enter into this flow restoration. And I think there's so many people today in so many walks of life, from the top to the bottom. You see these ideas of stuckness, just absolute stuckness. Even at a political level, you talk about Republicans and Democrats, and everybody says after the election and basking in the glory of being elected, I'm going to reach across the aisle. I don't see much of that. That capacity, to reach across the aisle means to break the stuck loop of I am a Democrat and I'm always going to do this because we're Democrats. I'm a Republican. We're always going to do this because we're Republicans. I think that a lot of these current tragedies that we're seeing in the world today of all types, show us that limited models of reality. What I sense happening a little bit in the Paris climate talks is just this capacity to completely reconstellate the world psyche. Because if you don't, the whole thing goes. The whole world, water, light, soil, all of these things are unless there is a holistic overview, then it's a broken record. Everybody's protecting their own.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so really to wake up, and we've had this talk before, it's important to use observation.
Yes.
And not to believe everything, like you're saying, beliefs, we believe these certain things and they become true. Not to believe everything your mind tells you. That was the best advice I've ever gotten. Was when someone told me that. It was revolutionary. You get caught in the drama of the thought. So observation, can you use fragrance and aromatics for and plants to help with observation of your mind?
Okay, so here's a very interesting kind of segue. Just in this. This is what I called in the first talk that I did, this kind of dendritic thinking. Dendritic means like a branch on a tree. You look at the main branch and then it branches off to another branch, and off of that there's another branch, like in a forked branch here and a forked branch off of that forked branch. And that's what to me is like the essence of kind of botanical-like thinking, is the capacity to not be fixated just to one line of inquiry, to be able ultimately to even hold, at least briefly, simultaneous thoughts. And even if you don't have two mouths, you have enough wherewithal to store in your memory the insight that you had while you're disclosing or discussing another one. And to address what you're saying, there's a whole other domain of that is kind of akin to shamanism, and it's called magical aromatherapy. And magical aromatherapy, if you look at any of the works of Scott Cunningham, and what magical aromatherapy strives to do, you couple the fragrance, you couple the oils with a visualization of going from state A, that's the, as it were, the impoverished or the stuck state, to visualizing the bloomed, floriser, wellness, flowing state of whatever it is you're addressing, whether it's income or emotional balance or creativity, whatever it is. And you couple a visualization, you go from the as if to believing so, and you make that leap of faith coupled with the fragrance, and you can imprint that by yourself or with a healer or a therapist. You say, when I smell this oil, I will, and you put your list down for transformational directive. I will no longer go into this fear state. I will no longer go into this stuck state. I will no longer perform this habitual response to my action. That this fragrance is kind of like an autocatalytic loosening and restoring of flow. And it's all embedded in a non-verbal fragrant molecules which then transduce down into your action. But you've got to set the intentionality of what you want changed, and you say to yourself, whenever I smell this, I will be fortified. It's like an aromatic talisman. I have imbued this initially with some kind of ritual of intentionality and of strength. It's like reinforces. And remember what I said about breaking the loop from fragrance to vision in the ayahuasca thing when you're stuck? This takes the fragrance and says, now I'm going to restore flow into this positive domain of the future realization.
Yeah, because we can have bad visions without drugs.
Oh,
many of us.
You don't need
No.
that at all.
Or not drugs, but botanical medicine. Yes.
Without any of that, it's just the everyday lifeness of it. You know, we feel we're trapped by circumstances of life. It's not only our own doing that somehow we're in this that we're in this situation, whether it's by our own design or by external design. Fragrance can be of help, but it really takes a strong imprinting, like a little ritual, doing it with somebody who's like a healer to help you set the so that you feel that you've got an empowered fragrance.
And I would imagine, and I think I know the answer to this, but I would think that any fragrance would work. It doesn't have to be basil.
No, it doesn't have to be. The basil was just for this stuck anxiety loop. You know, a lot of us get into all the time. Those senses of we don't have enough mojo, as it were, to have the energy to deal with the difficulties of life. So you're treating fragrance, and that's what when I referred to the first talk I did, I talked about, you know, the whole idea of botanical intelligence. That's what you're doing here. You're saying that there is an intelligence here that I can bond with and to use to interact with my intelligence, so that you have this synergistic kind of feeling.
I love it. And it's what I think when we were speaking on the phone a few months ago, it's really the floral wisdom or the floral, I think you called it the floral highway to awareness, which I loved.
It is. And it can be floral, it can be herbal, it can be root, it can be bark. But what it is, it's about coupling your intentionality. But if you want to arouse your intentionality for change, and fragrance can definitely do that. And I think that's where, you know, like in 1990 there was a big gathering of the fragrance, the real major commercial fragrance world in New York, and it was like a collective think tank. And I don't know how I got invited to represent the natural aromatics, the aromatherapy community. So I had a little while up on the stage. This was at the Lincoln Center in New York. And I remember I was saying that in the future, I'm just paraphrasing what I said, in the future, fragrance is going to move away from being just for seduction, for image, for power, for self, for glamour. And I said that fragrance is going to move back towards a more magical sense of helping a person to make significant transformational changes in their life path. And I feel that's what a lot of people working with fragrance, I think they're more aware of that now. In other words, we're using it for transformation. There's nothing wrong with glamour and seduction. It's wonderful because, when women put perfume on, a woman becomes flower, and it's beautiful. It really is. But then you want to have a spectrum of fragrant uses. And one of them, there's seduction, and then there's realization. Look at the use of incense in India or China or Japan. Incense is used to provide an atmosphere of realization, an atmosphere of tranquility, an atmosphere of peace, an atmosphere of changing the structure. It's not permanently, but it's suspending the quality of linear time and enabling us to go into a kind of parallel, not even a parallel, but a different domain of what, for example, the Australian Aborigines call dream time. And it can be in meditation, it can be in communion with the animal spirits. It's time out of time. That's what the dream time is. It's where the netters, the gods and the goddesses, talk directly with humans in a non-ordinary way. And fragrance in an incense, that's what it can do. I'm just saying that more and more, you can look at fragrance from everything from the level of just making a space beautiful to seduction to aesthetically pleasing to breaking mind loops. And then again, it's a way to bridge the worlds between the ordinary and the extraordinary. So I just think that more and more, I hope that healers and people working with oils will begin to explore this domain in a sensitive way, as well as the overt medical therapeutic use of things. We're beginning to look at the more and more the subtle energetic use. I think it has to be used responsibly, intelligently, and in conjunction with each person that you work with. There has to be this idea of restoring intentionality, restoring the capacity to reconstellate the psyche, the capacity to restore flow, that the capacity for transformation is a seed within us all.
It's a treat to talk with you again. I really appreciate you taking the time today. And if people want to contact you and take a look at some of the oils that you have and learn more, how can they find you online?
Well, first thing is I do not have a website. And that's really intentional, just because I've always said in a shamanic sense, the oils and just bring the people to me that you want me to interact with. So, but I would gladly give gladly give an email at least, so they could at least have some window, and that email is info@lifetreearomatics.com. That's info@lifetreearomatix for x-ray.com.
Thanks, John. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Many blessings, many aromatic blessings. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. You can find us online at sustainableworldradio.com and also on iTunes. For more information about permaculture and ecology, visit the Sustainable World Media YouTube channel, where you'll find videos about permaculture, aquaponics, organic gardening, rainwater harvesting, and much, much more. Sustainable World Radio is a listener-supported program. If you like what we do, please consider making a donation to the show. I'm your host and producer, Jill Cloutier, and thank you so much for listening.